Hi everyone, welcome back to my Aussie story. My name is Janina Sherry, and for today we'll be discussing the basics of the Australian federal elections. It's that time of the year again when Australians get to choose the people who will, in great part, determine the country's future. The 2022 Australian federal election will be happening on the 21st of May, 2022. That falls on a Saturday as usual. Early voting, however, has already commenced a few days ago on the 9th of May, 2022. Voting in Australian elections can be quite confusing and maybe even daunting. This is especially the case for those of you who are voting for the very first time, most notably are new Australians who may feel overwhelmed or are completely in the dark about Australian elections. Does this sound like you? If it does, then keep on watching as we discuss the basics of the Australian federal elections. Okay, so let's start with establishing who can vote. To put it simply, you can vote if you are an Australian citizen who is aged 18 or over and is enrolled with the AEC. So the AEC is the Australian Electoral Commission. It's important to note that in Australia, it's compulsory to enroll and to vote if you're eligible. Failure to do so may result in you getting fined. So what happens in a federal election? Basically, a federal election is when Australians vote for members of parliament whom they'd rather represent them, their views and interests in the House of Representatives as well as in the Senate. It is held about every 3 years. To give you a bit of an overview, the House of Representatives, also known as the lower house, are comprised of seats representing local areas throughout Australia. The people in the lower house are called MPs or Member of Parliament. On the other hand, the Senate, which is the upper house, are the ones keeping the lower house in check. Unlike MPs who represent electorates, senators represent states or territories. A common confusion that many new voters have about federal elections is that they'd be voting on who the next prime minister will be. But that's technically incorrect. As I've mentioned, you would be voting on who you want to represent you in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. How is the Prime Minister of Australia elected then? Well, the leader of the party with the most seats in the lower house will be the new Prime Minister. Alright, now how do you vote in an Australian federal election? Step 1, when you arrive at the polling place, a voting official will ask you your name and address, and then they will mark your name off the electoral roll. Step 2, you will be given 2 ballot papers. One is for the House of Representatives, so that will be a small green ballot, and the other one is for the Senate, which should be a big white ballot. Okay, step 3, go to the voting booth and make sure that you read all of the instructions carefully. And if there's anything at all that you don't understand, don't be shy to ask a voting official for help. Step 4, vote. For the green ballot, you must number every box in your order of choice. So number 1 being the candidate you most prefer to represent you in the House of Representatives, and so on. For the white ballot, you can choose one of the 2 ways to vote. You can either vote above the line or below the line. If you're voting above the line, you must number at least 6 boxes in the order of which party you'd most like to be in the Senate. Again, number 1 being your most preferred, number 2 being your second choice, and so forth, until you've numbered at least 6 boxes. If you're voting below the line, you must number at least 12 boxes, number 1 being your first individual candidate of choice and 12 being your least preferred. In case you made a mistake while completing your ballot, there's no drama. You can just ask for new ones and start again. And last step, step 5, place your folded ballot papers in the ballot boxes and you're done. Before we continue, just a gentle reminder to please like and follow us on our social media pages if you can. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all the other main ones. I'll put the links in the description box below if you're interested. Thank you. Anyway, let's move on to knowing the candidates. Aside from knowing how to vote, I think that it's also very important to know who you're actually voting for. This is because the votes that you cast will elect the people who will make laws and decisions on your behalf for the next 3 or so years. But how do you actually do that? With a bit of research, effort, and time is how. I know that finding time to do this with all of your other responsibilities in life can be a bit tricky. The good news is that there are a couple of websites out there where you can find easy to digest, relevant information about each of the candidates. In saying that, do keep in mind that there are a lot of misinformation that are being put out there, so it's best that you take your time to consider whether your source can be trusted. I've been suggested a couple of sites that seem to be good, reliable sources. These are, of course, the AEC's website, They Vote For You, and Vote Compass. I've attached the links for these sites on the actual post on myaussiestory.com if you want to check them out. Another good way to start is by watching debates between candidates. Now, what information about the candidates should you actually be looking for? I can't really tell you what to do, but I can suggest a few questions to get you started. First, what are their stands and what have they done with regards to the issues that matter to you? So, say an issue that matters to you is housing affordability. What does the candidate have to say about that, and what has he done about it? It's also good to know about their and their party's policies, views, and beliefs, and how these align with yours. For example, you're for increasing investment for renewable resource. Do you know if your candidate or their party vote for or against this? And lastly, I think it's important to know more about the candidate's character. Are they honest? Are they responsible? Questions like these. All right, so where can you vote? Now that we've gotten the heavy stuff out of the way, let's make sure that you know where to vote on the day of the federal election. I've mostly seen polling places at schools, but they're also usually located at churches, community halls, and other public establishments. To find the polling place near you, head on over to the AEC's website and type in your suburb or postcode. Again, the link would be in the actual blog post, and the link to that post would be in the description box below. According to the AEC, polling places would open at 8 a.m. and close at exactly 6 p.m. Okay, so there are other ways in which you can vote under special circumstances. These are: Number 1, early voting centers. If you're unable to get to a polling place on the day of the election, you can vote at an earlier date if you meet the eligibility requirements. As I've said in the beginning, early voting has started on the 9th of May. Number 2, interstate voting centers. If on the day of the election you're not in the state or territory where you're enrolled, you would need to vote at a designated interstate voting center. You may also consider early voting options if you're eligible. Number 3, voting overseas. It's recommended that Australian overseas voters participate in the election via postal voting. But if you prefer, some Australian embassies allow in-person voting. Number 4, voting by post. Again, as long as you're eligible, you can apply for a postal vote if you can't make it to a polling station on election day. Number 5, AEC mobile voting. There are AEC mobile voting teams who visit and reach out to people in remote communities, hospitals, care facilities, and the likes where people are unable to get to a polling place. And lastly, telephone voting. This option is available to voters with vision impairments, so if you're blind or has low vision, you may be eligible for this. Voting with a disability. If you're a voter with a disability or mobility restrictions, the AEC can provide you with the assistance that you need to participate in the federal election. The assistance can range from the accessibility of polling places to a Braille version of the official guide to the 2022 federal election. Democracy sausage. This is actually step 6 in the voting process, but no, it's not really. Kidding aside, it is a tradition in Australia to have a democracy sausage on election day. What is a democracy sausage? It's basically the same thing as sausage sizzles, which are sold at Bunnings on the weekends, only that democracy sausages are sold at polling places. And no, they're not for free, as they are operated as fundraisers. For those of you who don't know what a sausage sizzle is, it's a simple sausage wrapped in a slice of bread. It's actually amazingly satisfying to eat for what it is. That's it. There you go. The basics of Australian federal elections. I hope that this helped you understand Australian federal elections a bit more. You might have noticed that I didn't talk in depth about how the federal elections work here in Australia. This is because I don't believe that I know enough about it yet, although may I suggest an Australian YouTuber who, in my opinion, is quite well versed on the matter? I'll include the link to one of his videos below, but just fair warning that he's not really everyone's cup of tea. But yeah, that's it for today. Please like, comment, subscribe, click the notification bell, and visit myaussiestory.com if you'd like to see more of my journey and experiences as an immigrant here in Australia. Thanks for watching. See ya.